Hi guys. I'm going to start this a little bit differently after hearing all that great stuff about me. You can lay me to rest now, I think. But I grew up in the Atlanta area and went to Georgia Tech. It was the cheapest, best school I could get into is the reason I went to Georgia Tech. And met this woman, she wasn't quite a woman yet, met this woman child there. And we ended up getting married, and she was from Kingsport, Tennessee, and I was from the suburbs of North Atlanta. And to say that when she really wanted to move here that I was reluctant would be an understatement. It is absolutely the best thing that has ever happened to me or my family, and all that stuff would not be there without this place. CG and I talk about how this place is as much of a parent as we were to our children. So it is a special place, and the fact that you gather and give back to it is a special thing to do. And the fact I'm home, it just makes me feel, like myself. Okay, and the second thing I'm going to do is sometimes, so I've been in Nashville for the last 4 years as the Commissioner of Labor and Workforce Development. There's this thing called COVID, and there was 1 million people who went unemployed in the space of a couple of weeks, and I happened to be in charge of unemployment insurance. And so it was quite the time during that time. But when you get away from home, people don't always act like they act at home. I don't know if you've noticed that before. I noticed that in Nashville, but who I didn't notice that from was David Hawk. We worked alongside each other on some things, and he's the guy there that he is here, and I just want you to know that. So why don't you give him a round of applause as well. Now, I was completely terrible, but he was very good. Okay, so I'm going to spend 15 or 20 minutes talking about workforce development, which we're translating at the college right now to our area, and I have the numbers in my head for that too. And so I finished as commissioner in the governor's cabinet last Thursday at 4:15, and started as president the next Friday at 8 o'clock. So this is my week-long, today's a week. But let's do it at a macro level, at least at a state level, what we're up against in terms of workforce development. Because has anybody heard that you can't find people? Okay. So pre-pandemic, we talked about the skills gap. We had a generation of baby boomers who knew how to connect their hands to their heads with technical skills. And then we spent a couple of generations, 30 years or so, discouraging and even disparaging that kind of work. And then when they started retiring, we found ourselves in big trouble. And we said, we better not do that anymore. So that's the skills gap, because we didn't have anybody who could do anything. Now we still have that, but we also have a people gap. So typically Tennessee would spend $200 million a year in unemployment insurance. During the height of the pandemic, in a year we distributed $8 billion. So we went from $200 million to $8 billion with the same systems, by the way. And we were distributing federal checks. You heard about the $600 thing. All that's gone. It's gone. Health restrictions, toaster restrictions, all that gone. So why can't we find people still? A couple of things. One thing is the baby boomers who were leaving the workforce and who we had, because we had a skills gap, they all left. Seacrest out. They're gone because of the health concerns, and they also happen to be one of the wealthiest generations that has ever been in the United States, so they could afford to go. So they left, and we're still left with the skills gap, and it turns out that we have not been let's see the right word to say. We have not been procreating like we have. We have not been replenishing the population behind that baby boomer generation. So we simply don't have as many working age people. We just don't. So we have skills gap, we have this group that left, and we have this working age people is less than the previous one. So in the state of Tennessee, at least the last month or so that I was commissioner, we had more people employed in Tennessee than ever in the history of Tennessee. And we still can't find people. And we had more people involved in the workforce than ever in the history of Tennessee, but we still can't find people because the delta there is the growth. So what do you do? I mean, you can't start a baby making campaign because that's going to take too long, and I don't want to be the one who leads that anyway. And so what do you do there? Well, you're going to start hearing, because we've heard, we're going to have to set immigration to the side right now. So what do you do except for have immigration law changed to make sure that you have that labor supply that's gone? Because even if we hit a recession, you're still dealing with demographics that are going to take decades to overcome. Automation will help kind of push that number down, but it won't be enough. And we're going to see more check out yourself at Food City and all kinds of stuff as much as you can possibly do. So what do you do? What do we do as the state, and what do we do as a region? And we're going to figure this out as a region. So I'm just telling you that's on the front end. So we're here to figure this out. We're going to figure it out, and then we'll, just like we do usually, we'll tell the rest of the state what it is that we did. Okay, so the number that you always, so we went from the highest unemployment rate in the history of Tennessee to the lowest unemployment rate in the history of Tennessee in the span of 3 or 4 years. That unemployment rate is not what you need to look at. That is a funny number. Everybody looks at it, but it's dependent on other numbers. The number we need to continue to look at is something called the labor force participation rate, which is simply the number of people participating in the labor force. So it's a percentage of population. Usually, Tennessee is one of the highest in the Southeast. At north of, I think it's now north of 61%. Georgia's usually right there with Tennessee. That number needs to get to 64, 65% if we're going to solve this, in lieu if again we set immigration off to the side. Okay, so how do you do that? You don't have enough, you don't have the working age population, so you've got to get a higher percentage of that working age population if you're going to have enough people to do the work that we need to do, and if the economy is going to grow. Because the governor, the limiting factor on growth is access to people, not necessarily access to resources, but access to people. Okay, so in the state of Tennessee, there are, so let me say this first. 2 things state government can do is, and I'll have to think about this in context of education, but 2 things. One is kind of build common infrastructure, and the other is to get stuff out of the way. Go back and move regulations or get stuff out of the way. So what do you do when you only have, for example, in this, our region, we have 7,000 juniors and seniors in high school, and that number's not growing. It's stagnant to declining. So what do you do? How do you find these people? So at state level, there are 600,000 people without a high school diploma, which is more than all of people in high school. And those people are typically disaffected and not really in the workforce as much as other people. So you have a large number of people who are not in the workforce or who can't advance in the workforce because they don't have a high school education. So what's happening in Tennessee now, and what will soon happen in this region, is the adult ed programs, which is the GED programs, don't call it that anymore, but they'll start dual enrolling in college just like you do in high school. And that's happening all across the state, so we can begin to pull those people through, and they can be closing the skill gap and increasing their ability and the people gap as we pull them through. In our area, by the way, there's about 50,000 people without a high school diploma. Okay, so you have that big population. The other big population, and it's a effort that Representative Hawk and I worked on, and we have a grant in our region to help address this, is 2 million out of the 7 million people in Tennessee are on some sort of public assistance. So 2 million out of 7 million. And you get the mistaken thought that, well, those people are lazy, they're not working. My guess is a lot of them are working. They're babysitting or they're doing something like that. But what happens to them is if they make $1 more per hour at their job, they lose their they make too much money to get their child care benefit, or they make too much money to get their health care benefit. So they're making an economic decision to either participate less in the workforce or not advance in the workforce. And so as part of an effort going on right now in our region is to soften that, and they call that the benefits cliff. But we have 2 million people over there kind of on the sidelines who we can bring in. And again, when you're talking 600,000, you're talking 2 million, the percentages don't have to be that high to really have a good stroke at solving what we're trying to solve. Okay, 200,000 men and women transition from the military into civilian life every single year, not including spouses. Those people will typically have a higher unemployment rate than the general population. That doesn't make any kind of sense. So building the common infrastructure to reach those people and to bring them from that military environment into employment, getting them without making them take stuff over that they already know, the training that they need so they can advance in employment is something that's really being pushed at the state as well. And then I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I know in our region there's around 8,000 or so incarcerated because we have our institution at Mountain City, and across the state there's 95% of the people who are in jail or in prison are coming back to the community. We've got to do more and just hope it goes well. And the center of that is really this simple. If they have a good job, they don't go back. If they don't, they do. And so it's a recidivism issue, but it's also a workforce issue. There's a manufacturer in Bristol whose whole night shift is run by folks at Sullivan County Jail. And they're paying their fines off. They're going to have a job when they get out. And those are the sorts of things that are going to we're going to have to tap into other areas besides just the common pipelines that we type into, just because we don't have enough people. A couple of other things that have started and really made some good progress is, so part of everybody in this room learned, I would bet, all worked before you're 16. How many people worked before you're 16? Did you not work before you're 16? What were you doing?
I can't understand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, here, that's better. How many people worked before they were 16 years old? Yeah. You learn to work by working. And so what has now begun to happen in a lot of places, including our region, is work-based learning programs. So if I'm in high school, I have a job and I work. I never thought I would see Eastman have 16, 17-year-olds working at their facility, and they do. Part of the fear is I can't have a 16 or 17-year-old on my plant floor, and what we found out at the state was, at the time, because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble, I was the guy that could get them in trouble. And so we figured out a way to go consult with them and open up that pipeline. So a young person gets involved in work, a lot of good things happen and a lot of bad things don't. and you understand the work, and you're all of it trying to drive that labor force participation rate up. Last thing, this is as fast as I can talk because I grew up in Georgia. So the last thing too, right now in the state of Tennessee, we have more apprentices than we've ever had in the history of Tennessee. And so understanding that work as you learn model is going to be very important, and it's got a lot of momentum. And our area has some of the largest apprenticeship programs, and not only in the state but in the nation. And Northeast State has one of the largest apprenticeship programs that it runs, that it's a sponsor. It's a group apprenticeship in the state, competing with most of the other apprenticeship programs in the state. I think Eastman, and there's a labor organization in Chattanooga. I think those two are probably the biggest, and Northeast State somewhere in the top 10. The apprenticeship program is Northeast State's program, so a small business doesn't have to work with all that stuff to come in and set up their apprenticeship program. Okay, so what does that mean for our area? Let me do this first. Let me stop and see if there's any thoughts or questions or discussion, and if not, then I'll keep talking.
Jeff, many years ago, I had a construction company. We were warned against hiring undocumented aides. We would be face some type of prosecution if we did.
Right.
Nancy Pelosi made a statement that Florida needed those undocumented aliens we have now to pick crops. So is that law still in force, or we can?
You can't hire them.
We cannot.
No matter what Nancy said. Yeah, it's so part of the state will come and see. So yeah, and unless there's some sort of reform, and there. Across the state, you hear businesses saying, I know I can hire somebody who will work, but I'm not allowed to. And so there's pressure coming there. Whatever the political view is, I mean, it starts to become math a little bit.
Is that same?
Jeff,
Yes, sir.
I was delighted to hear your discussion about bringing our youth, high school students back into the workforce. Interesting enough, I had a conversation with a teacher at Dobbins Bennett who teaches trade school courses, and he also teaches physics. But we were talking about the fact that he said, in my trade school course, and these are generally kids that are not going to go to college, they may go to the community college, but he said none of them have jobs outside of school. They're just not working. And I was in high school in the 50s. Basically, everybody in my class had an outside job, whether they're working at the grocery store, delivering groceries, whether they're working we didn't have McDonald's then, but we had, car hops. Point being is that I'm delighted to hear that you're trying to tap that resource, and we just wish you a lot of success there.
Well, thank you. So in our region, what we'll do, and we've already started talking about it at the college, we have a great apprenticeship infrastructure that marries education. You have to marry education and apprenticeship. That's the model. You have to be employed, and you have to be learning and progressing in your salary. And we'll have pre-apprenticeships along with dual enrollment in the high schools. And when we've done that before, what that does is the grades in the class, every other class goes up. Because you get such engagement, and you think about going to a work environment, how much you learn, social cognitive learning, how much you learn, and not just that, the confidence you get, and you know what work is, and the intrinsic value of work while you're learning. And so that's a longer term play, but we will be embracing that. College really, really has a strength in that area, and it's going to be important to our area.
Jeff, this relates to the question that was asked, but, and I realize it's a federal question, but it impacts the states, obviously. but do we need a massive reform of our immigration laws?
So again, you heard the kind of laid out strategy. Now, I'd say Tennessee has, and we will here, has a more clear strategy of what's the problem, what we're going to do about it. But that is an uphill climb. And so my short answer is yes. However it comes out, because that difference between people and jobs is it's not going anywhere soon. That's going to be that, so you have to address it some way.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You're encouraging these young people to work, but they go and they apply for a job and they say, well, young person, you're not old enough, we can't hire you. What is, this is a dichotomy. The lower age limit has to be addressed in some way, shape, or form by the state of Tennessee.
So let me tell you this. We'll just give that one to Representative Hawk. He'll go fix it. So no, let me tell you this. So if you own a Black & Decker drill, not a Black & Decker, if you own a DeWalt drill, which is owned by Black & Decker, which was very disappointing to me when I found that out, it was probably assembled by a 16 or 17-year-old in Jackson, Tennessee. And so to answer your question, Charlie, we are figuring out that we can do that. And you figure that out by, if they're in an apprenticeship program, there's different abilities and that sort of thing that you can hire them. Eastman signed work-based learning, 12 of them, and they're all excelling, not surprisingly. And so, yeah, and you can get, as a business owner, you can get economic value from those, I almost call them kids, from those students as they work and as they learn. So we're getting there. And it's labor law, and the labor law allows for that given certain considerations. And the state will send somebody to your facility and help you figure that out. His name's Kenneth Neely, and he comes up here all the time. Okay, let's talk about Northeast State, which is what I really want to talk about. I can't tell you how many times I've talked about what I just said. It's like the Lord's Prayer. You say it so many times it really kind of loses meaning, even though it's not supposed to. I'm excited to be here because we have we've been talking about we have this. So it's, of course, this age population is student age too. And so I mentioned there's 7,000 juniors and seniors in the region, and we're trying to get them. ETSU's trying to get them. King's trying to get them. Milligan's trying to get them. Tusculum's everybody's trying to get them. And it makes us hard to be friends with the other educational institutions. We're nice, but I'm not going to tell too much. So we have to, just like labor, we have to look at other places. So for Northeast State, we own or oversee our adult education people without a high school diploma. Those people will start dual enrolling, which just means you're taking college classes while you progress in high school. And we will do that in a big way. Northeast State has 500 military affiliated students. We're going to grow that thing to 1,000. And you think about, they don't know it back on Bluntfield yet, but we are. You think about the region, we have the best VA in the country. And so it's not just that, it's getting them before they transition out. So that's going to be a big push for us, is that military piece. And over, wherever it is, over there at RCAM, there's 500 apprentices. There are 23 or 24 companies with apprentices at that place. We have a huge, beautiful building that has all the same stuff as it does in RCAM on the main campus. And part of what we'll do is leverage that strength and begin to go in the high schools, dual enrollment, pre-apprentice, and then have apprentices come and train them as they work. One of the things to think about too with apprenticeships, Tennessee has the first teacher apprenticeship in the country. and Clarksville's a little ahead of that. So it doesn't have to be manufacturing or anything like that. Clarksville's a little ahead. What they found, surprisingly, you look back at it, is so that lets the lunch lady become a teacher. And what they found, surprisingly or not surprisingly, is their teachers are beginning to look like their students. The access that you have, because I don't have to quit my job and go to school, I can do both. If I put my head down and do it and learn and go. So it's an old model, but it's still here because it works. So the college will really be pushing towards that as well. Again, we have, I think, as you go around and look at the state, we have a really, my dad would not like it if it said really unique. Unique is its own state. It's not just, okay, sorry, that was a kid. I went back to 4th grade there for a second. So the aviation facility, training facility that we have at Tri-Cities, there's nothing like it in the state. We happen to have an aviation site right there ready for economic development. So we are really going to be hard pushing on that as well, because the first thing, potential new business will ask is are there people here? Can we find people here? And with aviation, unlike almost any other place in the state or in the Southeast, we can say, yes, we do. Come, let's show you. We're not just saying we're going to do it, we are doing it. Right now, those kids go to Alabama or Houston or wherever they're going to go. So a lot of really, really good things happening at the college. We talked about a lot of colleges, community colleges, and it's really not well understood in Nashville, are junior colleges, meaning that they, I'm going to go to this place first and I'm going to go to a 4-year. Northeast State has the unique advantage, not the really unique advantage, of being a comprehensive. So I can go to welding, or I can become a nurse, or I can take English and transfer to ETSU. That's really different. We began to talk about how do you have a singular message when you're special because you don't have a specialty. And so that's part of what we'll be hearing too. But it's different, and it's an asset that other places don't have for us in the region. I wanted to come back, not just because I wanted to come back home, but because I truly believe that whether the region knows it or not, they're counting on Northeast State. We're the right size to execute. We have enough scale, but we're not too big to be clunky, to do a lot of things for the betterment, for the prosperity, not just economic prosperity, but cultural prosperity for the region. And so I'm excited, very, very excited to be a part of it and be doing that. So let me pause here. Any questions related to Northeast State Community College? You're going to make me feel really bad if you don't have at least one. Oh, thank you, sir. Get my feelings hurt.
What is the percentage of students in college or that start the college that do not finish? And I ask that question to lead into, are we mining that wellspring of folks to come and do technical work?
That is a very insightful observation, and the answer is yes. People who start college, less than 50% of them are going to finish. We see all the time people who didn't necessarily finish college, or even if they did, come back and take industrial maintenance or whatever the case may be, just because of the pay is there and the ability to progress in a career. And so, yes, you lose so many years, though, with people wandering around. So if we can get them in high school, get them directed in the right, that's the best thing to do. But the state has something called Tennessee Reconnect. So if I took a little bit of coursework and it didn't work out, I can go tuition free to finish that up at a community college or a TCAT. And so that's the mechanism. It's not a money problem necessarily. I mean, it's a life problem. There's other barriers, but that is exactly part of what we need to do too to bring those folks along.
Time for one more question.
Uh-oh, we got two.
My question's real simple.
Uh-huh.
Athletics, is that ever considered?
So actually, we talked about it a little bit. It gives you something to cheer for, rally around. If we did that, it would reflect the region. So you think about something like soccer, or you think about something like cross country. You get all those Boone runners to come help you. You'll win. So it's a conversation.
All right. How many grandchildren do you have, and what's CG doing?
Yeah, that's right. So CG is, she spends a lot of time being a grandmama these days. She's close to retiring, which is going to be great. We'll see how long that lasts. But so five grandchildren. So I'm doing our part to, repopulate the workforce. Just saying, I don't know how y'all are doing, but I'm doing fine. So 2 in Kingsport, 1 in Johnson City, and 2 in Asheville.
Does John have one?
John has 1. He has the latest edition.